Ladies and gentlemen, the next panel that we're going to talk about is going to be on maritime mobility and littoral distribution. Led by moderator Nick Rocha. Just wanted a quick note on Nick. Nick is a Chief Executive Officer of Neptune Shield and Gemini 3 Technologies. He's a military special operations veteran, a Navy SEAL, and he has over 23 years of experience in special operations community, excelling in leadership and strategic planning. Nick is also the founding past president of the Special Ops Survivors, a nonprofit supporting families of fallen special operations heroes. His company's focus on improving DoD intelligence, analysis systems, and providing innovative solutions to complex problem sets. Nick holds certifications as a Scrum Master and has a strong track record in guiding cross-functional teams in critical projects. Nick?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll welcome our panelists to the board here. All right, well, thank you guys very much. We want to say thank you to Christopher Newport University for hosting this event and also for just the Global Expeditionary Logisticians Symposium and the organization that has put this thing on. We also want to recognize our NATO partners for being here. I know we've got some folks from the Netherlands, from Canada, a lot of other distinguished guests. And we just thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and taking part in this symposium here. So. Without further ado, I want to take time to introduce each of our distinguished panel members. First, I'm going to start with Colonel retired Ben Mathews. He is the Director of Defense Programs for Regent Craft. He is a former Marine officer. He worked for Lockheed Martin Corporation. He oversaw the presidential helicopter program with the CH-53K King Stallion program, also with the KC-130 Juliet Hercules program, has been involved in multiple offensive and defensive missile weapons programs. He retired as a Marine colonel who commanded the squadron for Marine Aircraft Group level, as well as a Marine One pilot. That's a pretty unique distinction. And is also a graduate of the Naval Academy and then also the Naval War College. So that's the gentleman here to my left here. We also have Lieutenant Colonel Kyle Opel. He attended the Naval Academy, graduated in May of 2004 with distinction, Bachelor of Science and degree in economics. He also attended the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California with a Master's of Science degree, distinguished degree in information technology management, and in built proficiency in information systems, economics, and management necessary to support critical management and decisions needed to develop the utilization of complex and evolving computer-based military systems. In August of 2020, Lieutenant Colonel Opel executed orders to Marine Force Command, Marine Forces Northern Command, and Fleet Forces Atlantic. Lieutenant Colonel Opel then reported to Military Sealift Command in July of 2023, where he currently serves as the Deputy N5, headquartered right here in Norfolk, Virginia, or down the street in Norfolk, Virginia. Master Sergeant Owens serves as the Battalion Operations Chief for Combat Logisticians Battalion 8, an experimental battalion unit in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He has served faithfully for 20 years. Over Marine Air Force Task Force, or MAGTAF, from Okinawa, Japan to California to Quantico. He has 3,537 motor transport chief for 19 of those years until he recently conducted a job, lateral move over to 0491 Logisticians Chief. Master Sergeant Owen obtained his Bachelor's of Science from Organizational Leadership at University of Charleston, West Virginia. And he has 4 published articles across many distinguished periodicals. Master Sergeant Brandon Dillard is a Logisticians and Mobility Chief. He joined the United States Marine Corps in June of 2004, Basic Landing Support Specialty School at Camp Johnson, North Carolina. He has completed 5 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and other various armpits of the world. He's deployed with the 26 MU and as well as a Marine Special Operations company, Gulf. He served across the MAGTF and most recently served with Marine Forces Europe and Africa as the G4 Logisticians Chief. Currently serving as the staff NCOIC at the Logistics Operations School, managing the education portfolios for the basic, intermediate, and chief logisticians courses at the Marine Corps Combat Service Support Schools. Obviously, we're various military occupational specialists such as administrative, supply, logistics, finance, and even the Navy Corpsman and motor transport maintenance schools are at. And as he mentioned, my name is Nick Rocha, and not only a Navy SEAL, but CEO of Neptune Shield, a regional innovation and technology hub underneath the Economic Development Administration's new Innovation and Tech Hub program. Our focus is on protecting the homeland and ports and borders, empowering transitioning veterans, and helping them find a new mission and new purpose through innovation and technology that support the warfighter, but also have dual use for the trifecta of industry, government, and academia. So as we kick off this board here, I want to start with a quote from Omar Bradley, who was a general in the World War II and was known as a no-nonsense leader. He had a continual focus on planning, and he once said, "Amateurs talk about strategy, but professionals talk about logistics." I think it's very fitting because he was trying to get his folks and his officers to focus on the difference between just talking and making actual plans. And so as we move forward into this, I want to open this board up and ask the panel here to really think about that, what that means from how we won World War II without a single email, and yet now we've taken technology, and are we doing things better? Are we making things better? Are we making an impact with the technology we now have? And I'll pass this first question off to Colonel Ben Mathews.
Well, I think fundamentally for a firm like Regent, and from my experience in the Marine Corps, I mean, we're set in our ways. We go with what we know to be true. We go with what we've used in the past. And as Nick was talking about, if we continually look to the previous war or the previous conflict, we're going to be not necessarily doomed, but we're going to be challenged by innovation. And we want to be always looking forward to think about the fact that although email is wonderful, it's not a panacea. You have to actually follow through with training. In the same way that the Marine Corps sends all its aviators to WTI and its infantry officers to McTOG and logisticians to McTOG, we want to look and make sure that as we see innovative techniques come along, we want to ensure that we plan for those in the future and look to do things that aren't going to be completely targeted and saturated, whether it's in the first island chain or it's in the Baltic or the Mediterranean or wherever the next location might be.
Fantastic. Colonel Opel, wanted to give you an opportunity to also respond to that technology question on how we've advanced from World War II.
So from a Sealift Command perspective, I think we're still using some of the same steamships from World War II.
Yeah.
But the ability to understand what's required, and then for the supported force to understand that the speed with which we get that information. Right now we use a lot of electronic means to get that. I mean, we wait for a validation in JOPES to start moving things, but understanding what a requirement is before execution, understanding what the requirement is inside of campaigning can get us around some of the long lead times associated with the buildup for it. And again, to take those old steamships that we still use to try to move those things forward to meet the requirement in a timely manner.
Outstanding, thank you. Josh, I'll tee one up for you here. The Marine Corps Tactical Publication 1310H, Tactical Boat Operations references the need to blend in fishing, shipping, other local vessels, what we call in the NSW community non-standard vessels. What are you seeing in your realm, and what vessels are you needed, and how are we able to, taking that doctrine, what do you have now in your arsenal, and what do you need to be able to accomplish your mission?
Thank you for the question. It's funny, we just spoke about a little bit of clandestine operations a couple of minutes ago. The MCTP does note shipping vessels, fishing vessels, blend in. I have a 40-foot riverine boat at the battalion. It's camouflage. It's not necessarily the correct camouflage for the water. Can you probably put it at a backdrop against a tree line on the water and cover it with, cam and yes. But in the future fight, what does that really look like? with, social media and everything going on and in other parts of the world, snap a picture, oh, we're here. If we blend into the environment like what camouflage is supposed to be, if we listen to what the doctrine is stating inside of the pubs and we practice to that, I think that gives us a really good advantage, way better than that. But I guess to answer your question right now, we don't really have anything. I'm advocating for more boats. We have a MET, Mission Essential Task, that states conduct littoral transportation in our battalion. We're not the only CLB to have boats, and certainly not the first, but we do have one boat now, and I need to get after, as an operations chief, what does that mean for maritime mobility in the future? Unfortunately, at Camp Lejeune, I'm limited in some of those things. One thing is signature management and survivability, because I can't really go out and conduct those things and that training with a camouflage boat. At CLB 8, I'm looking for customers. Unfortunately, we're not DS to anyone. CLB 6 is, DS to 6 reg, and CLB 2 is DS to 2nd reg. So I have to ensure that I have a really good relationship with those folks before I go steal, basically, support for 6 reg or 2nd reg. So we have to have that relationship in order for my guys to go out and train. So if they're going to go out and train with the boats, the relationship between us and 6 reg or us and 2nd reg, and how we're conducting those operations. For example, we just did 2-6 Scout insert a few months back, and we didn't get a chance to rehearse prior to, but these 2-6 Scout, they're wearing sniper uniforms and different type of gear, and we had to insert them inside. What we did was at Mile Hammock Bay, and all around us were fishing vessels, not one military craft on that water in Camp Lejeune. So did we blend in? Did we do what this MCTP said? No, we didn't. We looked like a conventional force, so we projected power and we went in. So I would ask the rest of the audience, do we need to blend in more, maybe in the beginning, or is what we're doing sufficient? I don't know the answer to that question. We submit a lot of storyboards, a bunch of after actions, and we're getting after it, but there's really not a lot of guidance from the top, if that makes sense.
Excellent. And then Master Sergeant Dillard, I'd ask you kind of the same thing. Are you seeing from the schoolhouse that you're giving the guys the tools that they need to be able to execute, not just in the training environment, but essentially when they deploy to austere environments? Are they having the tools to be able to get after the problem set?
Okay, so let me start. Mr. Hudson with his South Boston education. I have a Mississippi public education, so y'all have to bear with me here. So, of course, I'm going to turn this and make a plug for the schoolhouse. TCOMS has 3 focus areas. I focus on 2 of those, area 1 and 3. Adaptive and decisive Marines and a foundation for information age learning and assessments focused on outcomes. And that's something we're trying to get to at the schoolhouse. So, whereas we are directed to only teach doctrine. I cannot teach conceptual information to our students. We have to train them to their TNR standards and the performance steps associated to that. We do have a level of flexibility in the development of our scenarios. So for those of you that are not aware, we've gone through a massive change in the 04, 31 and 81 communities. Now we have 04 41s, logistics specialists. Those guys transitioned to be 04 91 logistics chiefs. So with that merger of those 2 MOSs, we're rewriting all of our curriculum. And thanks to a few people in this room, we're actually going to implement tactical decision games, operational decision games, gallery walks, 21st century learning methods to get away from the informal lecture. I stand in front of you on a podium, I talk to you. No, we're gonna have these students actually interact, and the overall end state, the goal at the intermediate level initially, is to have our young corporal sergeants and staff sergeants able to speak at the level of a company grade officer. I think our education pipeline thus far has not produced that. I don't think our Marine Corps PME produces that, so we're going to try to do that at LOS. So when you ask how are we teaching, how are we getting into these concepts, we're sprinkling them in. That's the best we can do with the left and right lateral limits that we have, but our scenarios are based on Indo-PACOM type areas. Initially, the intermediate course will move those forces to the region, and the chief's course will take over and then sustain the force and also start to get into the operational level of logistics, which is important because I think everybody in this room would agree the Marine Corps and operational level logistics don't play well together. We are a tactical organization, and we need to start branching out from that and understanding our partners' capabilities and the joint forces' capabilities.
So that's a great question. So, or a great point rather, in this joint environment, when we're supposed to be working with Navy and Marine Corps and Army and Air Force, there seems like there could be some overlay in the fact that, hey, if the Navy is getting, combat craft assaults and they're doing away with their 11-meter ribs, or they're moving to the wing craft and getting away from their Zodiac craft, instead of sending those to Dermo, we could be establishing relationships there and essentially, NSW or the Coast Guard handing those off so that we get a longer shelf life out of those and then really increase the force. Would that be a benefit to you guys? And do you see some ways in which that could be of use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Recon's getting rid of their cricks as they get a new e-crick in. So I called the Master Guns Ops Chief, like, hey man, can I have those? Sure, let's do the Dermo process. Those supply gets with our supply, we make it happen. The problem is that we can't get the motors. Why do I need a crick in a COB-8? Some of you are probably asking that question. Well, because my 40-foot riverine boat, we call it the Riverine Assault Support System, can transport up to 18 people, so TOP. The bow lets down, the stern opens up as well. I can drive the boat, and as we're moving, a little dangerous, but with rehearsals we can get it done, right? And I can put the crick in the back of the boat, right? And I can take the stern out. I can launch USVs, unmanned surface vehicles from it. But if I have 2 cricks and the 40-foot riverine boat, now that means I can transport how many Marines? 30 now, right? So 11-meter ribs, 7-meter ribs, the extra small boats for littoral transportation. We're not really getting any of that. 2nd AAB Battalion has some of those, and I guess we're waiting on the MEU for that and what that answer looks like, if we can even get those. We've reached out to the Navy at Camp Lejeune. We've reached out to the Coast Guard twice. Both of them have been our safety boat as we go out. AAB Battalion, their TEEP's it's way too saturated, so they haven't had a chance to become our safety boats yet. But I don't even have enough boats to become a safety boat. And with the engines for the cricks, they're too expensive. So for ADS, I want 4 engines for 4 cricks. That's $95K, but I can go out in town and purchase a Mercury now for under $7K with a 5-year warranty, which now for the next 5 years, I don't have to worry about as a battalion extra parts or services because the warranty is going to cover that, right? So there's a disconnect there in industry and how we get these things. But 100%, if they're dermoing these assets elsewhere, let's grab them. We got our 40-foot riverine boat from Combatant Craft Division up in NAVSEA. Well, as down actually from us. So it was sitting in the yard for 10 years, I think. Our science and technology guy at the MLG reached out, found it, got it for us, and now we're working the piece to basically CCD said we can keep it. We don't have to give them any money or anything. We just have to own the maintenance associated with it. But for so far, this thing has been sitting for 10 years in this yard. It never became a program of record. And after sitting for 10 years, it started up. It purrs like a kitten. It's great. It's got a 22,000 pounds with a 1.5-foot draft, which is phenomenal for riverine ops. The problem is and where we have issues is that we can't really go ship to shore in anything over like Sea State 2. So where are those boats at? Can we get them? If there's outside agencies like the Navy or the Coast Guard or someone else that are dermoing those boats because they don't need them anymore because they got new ones, oh, by the way, hey, we can grab those and bring them to the battalions if the Marine Corps decides that we're going to continue this maritime distribution or littoral transportation, whatever buzzword we're going to call it, at the battalion level. Personally, I think it's a good idea. I think we need more of these things. I can talk about coxswain courses later on, but and where we get in our training. But yes, to answer your question, yes, we can definitely use them.
So along the same vein, I had the unique honor of being able to serve with EWTG PAC in Coronado, California as the one SEAL billet for the Marine Recon. And, when you first join the military, you think, hey, you're the only service that counts and everybody else sucks until you start working with somebody else. And then you realize, wow, these guys are really capable. They're fantastic. The Marines and the SEAL teams are really, the other 2 men's department of the Navy. And we've got fantastic women too, so not to exclude them, but you really start to realize, as I was there, that man, they were saving chem lights, putting them in the freezer and trying to extend the life on them and tying little pieces of 550 cord together and extending the life. And I was like, man, I'll just go over to the team, bring a whole bunch of boxes of chem lights and a bunch of rolls of 550 cord and all that. But I recognized that there were things that they needed, and then there were things that they didn't necessarily need. And I'm not trying to get you to out yourself and say, hey, there's certain things that we just don't need. But if you had in your inventory and looking at the stuff you have, and this is really to the two senior enlisted leaders here, is there stuff that you have now that is not, in use as much, or maybe doesn't have as much value as the stuff you do need that you would be willing to, as you recommend to your leaders, hey, we could do less of this and more of that. What are those things you could do less of to accomplish the mission?
I mean, for me personally, being a logistics chief, I don't want to give up anything.
Right.
I'm going to hold on to everything, and I'm going to tactically acquire as much as I can.
Okay.
So I don't know that I would go as far as to saying we need to get rid of anything. What I am most concerned with for the topic of this panel is how we're going to support and sustain our force. Guys like Josh Owens are going to figure out how to do the littoral intermovement. Our medium landing ship's going to take care of a lot of that for us. What I'm concerned with is why are we not looking closer into concepts like the hybrid air vehicles? I don't know if anybody else in the room has seen these things, but they can loiter for a long time. They're a multi-purpose platform. We can float them in the WES, low signature, and you don't see a lot of that, and I've been to many conferences, and I actually had a chance to work with these guys, and the capabilities for those things to do ship-to-shore, sensor platforms, loitering, airdrops, they can do that for us, and that's another means in which we can move our things around the battle space. So I think that's what we need to be thinking about is what can we get that's going to be able to be a multi-use platform for us so we're not restricted just to surface movement.
Fantastic.
The Littoral Transportation Working Group that happened a few weeks ago, I think Colonel Angel, you were there for that. Major Monica says hi, by the way. I don't know where they're going with that. There's a small boat working group at H1, I think every Friday, sometimes they cancel it, led by a lieutenant commander. We are lacking in assets. Our boat's not a program of record, so where's the money coming from? We're not necessarily lacking in training, but I would just caution the decision makers on this. In the early years of Iraq, we just decided to throw a bunch of armor on these Humvees. I remember the M1114 in 2006 had less than 100 miles, and we had to replace the power steering pump. So let's think critically about that. I'm hoping this small boat working group is figuring that out. Excuse me. But instead of, forgive me, but instead of a knee-jerk reaction, let's go grab all this stuff now, let's do a really deep dive of like what we actually need for littoral transportation. I think Regent, the colonel over here, has a really good platform with what they're using. If you haven't seen the simulator out in the lobby, but that's something I could use. I don't really have anything that I don't want to give up. Just like Brandon said, everything I'm going to keep. I'm a contingency planner by nature, so I'm going to keep everything just in case. But I need, at the battalion level, I need more assets at the tactical level. We have training. We're sending the guys to Coxswain's course. I think we're making it a thing to send guys to the SINSEC 4 course for Coxswain training. For those of you who don't know, Coxswain training is where they go learn how to drive the boat. They learn to do radar at night, the whole nine. Currently, we're sending guys to FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Glencoe. I think I have 5 guys there now. But we're getting the training to get to that point. We have the SOPs written on how to operate these things. We just need more assets. Are we going to turn a battalion into a littoral transportation battalion and do nothing but boats? Or are we just going to COB 6, COB 8, COB 2, send your guys to training, here's 2 or 3 boats per battalion, and let's see what happens? I don't know what the answer to that is. I do know that we need more assets, though.
So as big Navy and big armies fight in austere environments around the world, part of the issue is getting our forces to the fight and being able to take what we have, both as far as personnel and equipment and resupply, getting them to, halfway around the world. The big Navy has an issue with those last, 15 or so meters between the outside the shore break into the littorals and then onto the beach. in some of those areas where we have a struggle and maybe we need smaller craft, we've transitioned over from, the big LPDs down to, okay, now we're going to, start using LCACs and floating above the water there. And these guys are called pilots. But as you start to move into crafts like what REGENT has created, how can we extend the life and really a dual use for both the civilian world, but also the military world, and extending not just for conventional forces, but for maybe special operations type of purposes with a craft like the REGENT?
Sure. So the Sea Glider out there, as you've seen, is our first full-scale prototype will be in the water in October and will be flying by first quarter of 25. The vessel itself was designed for the civilian market. We've sold over 650 on 6 continents. And it came to our co-founder's attention that the opportunities that it presented to itself to have a 6.5-foot cabin in the back with 22 feet of length, and you could put 12 Marines in the back or an ODA team if the Army was utilizing it. And to do this clandestinely, because we don't put an IR signature out, it just came to be a natural fit. I don't know about dual use so much, but I think that the vessel we're designing does all of those things. It moves things that need to be moved, whether it's soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines, or special forces, or cargo. To be here at the GELS event and to be talking to logisticians, to be talking about that last tactical mile. I mean, literally, we've done for the last 20 years everything over the land. But think about how a Sea Glider could be utilized in any environment, whether it's from our civilian market to take you, say, from Miami out to the Bahamas in 30 minutes, to recharge faster than your iPhone, to come back and to be able to have it crewed by a staff sergeant and a corporal that goes to a course that's run by the schoolhouse, train the trainers and set them up. It is, like I was saying in my opening remarks, we don't need to keep thinking about how things were done over the last 80 years. I had a person speak to me outside that said, there's a Title 10 requirement that only the Navy can own boats. Well, that means that we need to change Title 10. The Marines have to be able to do what's necessary. Special forces need to be able to do what's necessary. And I did my last 3 years in the Marine Corps and the Pentagon and watched what the 535 across the river did. They could care less what Title 10's about. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about their economy in their areas. We need to change that mindset in the 535. We need to change that mindset in the Pentagon to ensure that we're getting the things that the forces need to ensure that wherever the United States is, we dominate. And if that means logistically to use Sea Gliders to move stuff that last tactical mile in the littorals, or whether it's to use those Sea Gliders to move special forces in infill and exfil or CASEVAC, our vessel will do multiple missions. It's just up to people like Colonel Angel to define what he wants to do with it and for the staff to come with it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So as you look at the line between the inter and intra theater movements, obviously 70% of the countries around the world have some kind of coastline or riverine or intercoastal waterway. It becomes increasingly blurred as far as the capacity and the shortfalls and the capability gaps that inevitably present themselves in that contested logistical environment. So Colonel Opel, I'll ask you, what authorities and organizational capabilities exist to facilitate that transition of delivery of personnel and equipment from the strategic to the operational, and then to the tactical level within the maritime mobility domain? And then where is there room for growth and delegation?
So a lot of what we don't have is what's been talked about here is, the connector piece. And a lot of what we've been hearing is, how long things take to come online. LSM, some of the LCU, thoughts that we have, but essentially, contracting and authorities for contracting in the interim. To Massern's point about whether or not we can blend in a vessel that's in the archipelago that's moving people that looks just like the next one over is something that you can't buy. But authorities inside of some of the inter that we need to take a look at, how do we take some of the contracting authorities that exist at echelon 2 and echelon 1, and how do we push some of those things down? And I know some of the new CLBs have that contracting capability, and getting that capability forward is critically important. But our ability to not have to wait and reach all the way back to, for instance, for Sealift Command, we can charter anything, and I say that loosely. With the right requirement and with the right funding, you can charter a capability to do something. Right now, there's a lot of discussion about what is considered seagoing and what is considered not. The only Marine at the command, seagoing to me is anything on the water, so that's a little bit simpler view than I think some of the Navy guys take. But we're in discussions now with some of the deputy assistant, somebody for policy on how do the authorities that exist inside of organizations already in the Navy, in the naval community, how do we use those to get what's needed inside the littorals? It's probably not everything. I mean, not to hit on the wargaming guys, but the TAK, the Watson, you're like, look how slow the Watson is. That hurt a little bit. That's our ship, so but that's okay. So you can change that in your model. That would be awesome. Make it a little bit faster. But our ability to identify what those requirements are, what can we do to make it happen? So not try to stick around to the point about Title 10, I think, that we just brought up is, maybe we need to look at how we own them. Maybe it's not owning them, maybe it's operating them, maybe it's support relationships, but there are things that we can do to facilitate getting the right piece of equipment and the right Marine to the right spot early enough, and it doesn't have to be something we have to buy and do the long lead time and go through all different milestones, but how can we use those things with the authorities we have now? How do we push them down? How do we get people comfortable with a captain and a staff sergeant, working through contracting of a smaller vessel to go from the sea base, from a TAKR, from a TAKE, and push those things down forward?
Yeah, spot on. That's fantastic. So as we move into the transition of technology, and obviously there's the AI ML conversation that's going on, how do you see that impacting your arena and your specific area of expertise? And do you see that there's going to be, man outside the OODA loop? And of course, I've got to share that in my definition, OODA loop for Marines was always observe, overreact, destroy, and apologize. I got to be careful here, but as you look at that, yeah. But as we look at that, how do we incorporate AI ML in a way that is going to help us to get the tools and the resources and the people to the war fighter, and especially in medevac and CASVAC situations where we don't want to put more people at risk? Yeah. And I'll pass that on to you, sir.
Yeah, that's great. At Regent, we're already looking at that. We have a quarter-scale tech demonstrator that already has autonomy built in, and we're building autonomy into the Sea Glider just for that specific reason. We want to be able to take the Sea Glider and use it in the CASVAC role, in the infill exfil role, contested logistics role, across the board. As I was saying earlier, we believe that it'll be a staff sergeant, that's the boat captain, and a young corporal, that'll be his first mate. And if you haven't seen the simulator, I'll just give you a quick brief. It goes up to 12 knots, all software control. Literally, it's left and right and forward and fast and slow. We have AI built into the thing. Once it gets up and onto the hydrofoils and then gets airborne up to 160 knots, if you decide to land, you just pull the power back to stop. Pick the direction, and the software does the rest of it. All of that, it'll pick out your best landing spot. It'll pick out your best landing zone anywhere out there on the water, and it's all done for the crew. It's not like when I went through flight school back in the early 80s where it was 2 years and millions of dollars. These kids come to us, and we've had young Marines and sailors and soldiers flying the simulator already. In 5 minutes after they're into it, they're ready to go because the software does so much stuff for them. And we believe that's the future, not only of, so for example, in our prototype, we have 2 sets of controls, right? But in reality, the software does so much that we think in prototype number 2, it may be just 1 set of controls. That's a function of how the civilians want to do it, but there's always going to be somebody up front in case the software goes bad, Right. AI ML is not a panacea for everything, but it really does make it better for the joint force.
That's fantastic. So the other thing that we look at, as we start to see these drones come online and the swarm of drones that are starting to attack our forces here, how do we counter that? What are some of the things that you guys on the ground level are looking at, maybe from the classroom, maybe from the field, and maybe this is geared more towards Josh and Top here. What are y'all's thoughts on how do we get after that problem?
It's you.
It's one of my favorite topics. You guys remember the 2014 Olympics where they had that drone light show? And I think they did it recently as well. I think that's already been weaponized. I can't speak to that because I just don't know. I'm limited in my, own research and what's open source. But I mean, drones are not the only threat, obviously, to maritime mobility or vehicles on the ground or C-17s or whatever. But I do think that right now it's something we need to take seriously because you got a seek and destroy drone swarm with 500 to 2,000, human out of the loop, machine-driven, AI-driven drones who take off and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to stay in the air until I complete my mission because that's what I've been programmed to based on all the data collection that's inside that machine. In Ukraine, the FPVs are fairly cheap, like $500 to $700, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but now you take a company that spends a little bit of technology and money on these things and they, allow them to synchronize as they're moving through the tree line in a dense forest and they don't hit one tree because of how this AI has been incorporated in them. And then now you look at that 500 are coming at your position, what do? The Mathews is not gonna do anything with that, it's a direct fire weapon. These little guns that we have that I've looked at in Marine Times or whatever, with the 0311 has it, I'm gonna shoot the drone out of the sky with a directed energy type weapon or EMP pulse or whatever. Yeah, that's great for one or two drones. You've seen videos probably with Ukraine where they're on a four-wheeler, an ATV, and the guy on the back shooting it with a shotgun, he misses. That's the real threat that we face. In the maritime environment, on the ground, and helicopters. I mean, you've got a drone swarm coming at a 53. Imagine how much money that, you see what I mean? So I like to call myself like an EMP expert, electromagnetic pulse, and we can talk later about that offline. But do we have systems like that that's gonna stop an entire swarm? Imagine being in the defense or FOB or wherever, and you see what's going on now, and you've got those onesies and twosies coming in, dropping munitions on, inside tanks or whatever. And some of you have probably seen the elaborate spider web looking thing that they're putting on these vehicles to stop the drones with cami netting and nets and spikes sticking out looking like, Hellraiser. But now you've got 500, 2,000, 3,000 cheaply made who have been programmed to do their job and not come back until they're able to do their job. And then you've got Ukraine currently now, and I don't even know if it's happening in Israel or elsewhere. And then now those drones are defeating the, what do you call it? Sorry, I had a brain fart.
Well, I'll step in and
What's
say
the
that.
system? Hold on, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The system, the jamming system, sorry about that. Those drones are defeating the jamming, right? So now, do we have something strong enough? And then if we do, are we gonna pull this trailer behind a JLTV? And then now it detects these drones, we push the button, it zaps the drones, and then how much energy do we have to recharge that thing? Does it require to be recharged? Is it working on batteries? I don't know what that looks like. I would like to see what that is, because I would like to try that as an experimental battalion at CLB-8. I would like to go out in the field and have some company or some battalion come out with 200 or 300 drones, and I want to see if that thing works, if it exists, because this is a real threat.
So I want to save a little bit of time for questions here, so I'll just pose to the audience. If you have any questions for any of our distinguished panelists, we'll get somebody to walk around with a microphone here, and please wait for them to get up to you here.
If you had prepositioned or rapidly deployable capabilities, what are you lacking that you could preposition or rapidly deploy that could contribute to your current logistics enterprise to dominate? I call it seize the tactical domain.
Great question. Lieutenant Colonel Opel, you want to?
What do we need?
What would you like to see?
So, large ships inside of the future environment are somewhat difficult. Whether or not we're going to bring a large TAKR or something forward is going to be is that so. You get some of the connector capability, but realistically, it's if there's more ashore, and then really it's I don't think it's something that we can provide, but it's indications and warnings. One of the comments made earlier was about about a year to set the theater. I think we need to, as we talk about what needs to go where and whether or not it's on a ship or not, but Logistics operations can be seen as escalatory. And if you have multiple large LMSRs and those things moving, that's a signal. So how do you normalize those things happening out there? So doing more maritime-based operations sooner, but then also having some connections to what's on the ground inside of different services.
Just want to jump in one thing. I think the most important thing is not a widget that we need. I think we need true integration into the joint sustainment web. That is what the Marine Corps needs to figure out, what we can bring to the fight and what they can provide for us. I don't know if anybody's experimented. MCDP4, the first vignette, talks about Marines talking directly to DLA. They put on their little headset and they're, hey, this is what we're short on. Can you send it to me? And this guy comes over the web and says, hey, yeah, I can get that to you. But in practice, the Marine Corps doesn't create a big enough demand signal to do a DDXX, in exercise capacity. We need to get better about that. We need to really war game that thing out. And then I don't know if anybody heard yesterday, but the Army Sustainment Corps is nearly as big as the Marine Corps writ large. I don't know if anybody took that away. So I'm pretty sure, we can integrate into that and get a lot more support and sustainability and flexibility.
Outstanding. Question?
Morning, gentlemen. Chief Warrant Officer Kyle Babka, 1MEF, G4 Fuels Officer. This question is really for the group, but more looking at you, Master Sergeant Owen, because you mentioned talking about the Coxman courses, IBO courses that you're sending your Marines to. Have you had a hard time plugging into that pipeline, and who's providing that? Is it EWTG that you're sending those folks to?
No, we haven't had a problem at all, sir. We send them up to the regiment. The regiment gives us the course dates. I'm assuming they're getting them from the MLG. We have no issues with that. EOTG is not allowing us to go because I think that's an MOS producing, and they're filled up anyway. But the way I understand it, and the MLG folks in the room can correct me if I'm wrong, the way I understand it, we're moving more towards a SENSEC 4 course right now, just because it provides like everything that they need, all the risk mitigation and all that stuff. But I don't see anything wrong with the Flexi course either. The problem with the Flexi course, it's all the way down in Glencoe, Georgia, but it's still good training. So we don't have any issues with that right now.
Awesome. And then we got time for one real quick question and answer.
I'm Tim Gitters, National Director for Logistics Resilience with the EMP Task Force, and there is a broad spectrum of expertise available with the EMP on the commercial sector side, and they're dealing with things, but down to the micro level where the computer chips that support the energy systems, the navigation, control panels, things like that, the sourcing of things as simple as that, where you've got foreign contract suppliers or even domestic suppliers, but the base elements, the wafers and the chips are actually coming from overseas, or there's no verification of their reliability or their safety. So that's something else that has to be taken all the way down into the supply chain to make sure that we're not compromised from the very beginning with the systems controls. Thank you.
Is there a question in there or just more of a comment?
Well, the question would be, is the sense of urgency seems to be lacking within, government. So how do you, in the military, put raise the level of urgency before we get to the crisis situation on the supply chain, that where industrial is able to expedite some innovation with the military?
So real quick, went recently 3 or 4 weeks ago to a conference in NDU, and one of the key topics that they talked about there on the joint staff was supply chain risk management and mitigation. So there's already a policy out there for that. They're already looking at that. They're looking to use large language models and AI to actually deep dive into, hey, where does our stuff come from? Where are our critical vulnerability points? So if you're asking how do we generate a bigger demand signal, we do every day. We've got guys like Josh Owens that are throwing out demands left and right. So hopefully that gets to what you were saying, sir.
I understand where you're coming from. I, too, am a member of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, which, for those of you that don't know, the Congress congressionally funded it for years. The breakoff is what this task force is. I would argue it's between that and cyber, it's our most critical vulnerability. And we can talk offline about that, but what are we doing? If an EMP happens right now, will our Humvees, JLTVs, and 7 tons move? I don't know. I would hope that we have some sort of measure in there. I actually wrote an article about this in the Naval Institute Proceedings magazine titled, I forgot what the title was, we can talk about it offline, but my contribution to the task force was to get the military to think about that. What are we doing? I mean, not just a nuclear burst 25 miles above Kansas, but what about directed EMPs, directed energy, that can project arguably between Russia and China out to 30 kilometers, maybe. And if that fries your system, do we have measures in place to mitigate that? Same thing with AI. So going back to the AI question, yeah, great. I love AI. It's good. ChatGPT is cool and awesome. It wrote a whole storyline for me. But if that goes down, do we have systems in place? For example, the automated information systems like CLC2S, that the question he asked yesterday. If I know how to operate CLC2S as a junior logistician, and then AI comes in and makes it easier for me, and then we have a cyber attack massively or an EMP, now that system goes down, all of the things that were made easy for me, I've just lost that basic understanding of how to operate without that system. So do we have those measures in place? We can talk about that too, so.
Yeah, great point. And all these are great conversations that we hope that you will continue on our next break. We're going to be coming back in here at 11:20. We want to thank these panelists. We want to thank Regent for hosting this. And again, thank you so much for having these gentlemen up here. Thank you so much.